All right, it's rolling. We're rolling on this. All righty. Yes, it's Friday, folks, and we're back again for another installment
of the other morning show. I'm Don Van Garley.
I'm TruePowerIsMine.
And welcome. Today's date is June 15th, 2018.
The year of our Lord.
First off, I want to say thank you to all the new subscribers, all the subscribers that's been with us, all the people that have dealt with the show.
Yes. And also, I just want to give an update on the T-shirt situation. We had to go through another vendor. The vendor that we've messed around with basically shortchanged us. So we're looking at basically just a 2-week delay. And for everyone who's pre-ordered, I am giving you an extra T-shirt for free. So you will be receiving 2 T-shirts for the price of 1. That's for all the pre-orders so far. And once again, folks, I'm terribly sorry for the inconvenience on this. And thank you for supporting the show.
Yep.
All right. So without further ado, we have a very great guest for tonight. We have Wayne Madsen. He is a journalist, a retired U.S. Navy personnel, and a man that I truly value his opinion and insight on so many aspects to what's going on. So you there with us, Wayne?
I am here.
All right, sir. So just to get into it just a little bit, before the show started, we were talking about Donald Trump meeting with Kim, and did you have any opinion on that?
Well, I think it's always good to meet any world leader. I would have hoped that he would have met with President Rouhani of Iran and the new fairly young president of Cuba, whose name escapes me, but he took over the reins of the presidency from Raul Castro. I would wish he would meet with President Maduro of Venezuela, but he met with Kim Jong-un. But I'm afraid that his fealty towards dictators, which we saw when he saluted a North Korean rather benevolent general. And then today, at a White House press gaggle, he said that he was very impressed by the way North Korea's people obey Kim Jong-un, and he'd like to see his people do the same thing.
With him.
Now, the White House is trying to walk that back and saying, he's talking about his staffers, but it's quite clear that
he's talking about the American people.
Kim Jong-un demands that kind of following
through fear and intimidation.
Everyone in North Korea.
Right.
So, have you heard anyone ever refer to Donald Trump as our first dictator?
Well, we've gotten close before, but yeah, I really believe that at this point in time we're dealing with somebody. George W. Bush once joked right after he was elected. I think it was in the wasn't after he was inaugurated, but was in the transition period between Clinton and his administration. Said things would be a heck of a lot easier if this was a dictator.
Yes, I remember that.
Dictator. Mm-hmm. And then he laughed about it. Well, I didn't find that funny whatsoever. But Bush did a lot of things, of course, that I thought bordered on authoritarianism. But what we have now with Trump is somebody who goes out of his way to laud, somebody like the leader of North Korea, who he may not be the only dictator in the world, but he's a very brutal one.
Absolutely.
And so I look at, children being put in prisons, separated from their parents. This is what happened at Auschwitz. This is what happened at Bergen-Belsen. This is what happened at Dachau. and Trump blames the Democrats for this. I mean, the man is absolutely insane, and because I think he actually does have dictatorial ambitions, I've started another website, and it's still under construction. I'm looking at it as a sort of an information website to let people know what kind of Nazism we have in this government right now, but also as a resistance website. It's called, the website address is vonstauffenberg.org. Now, the reason I called it von Stauffenberg and the von Stauffenberg group is that Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg was the leader of the anti-Hitler movement amongst senior military officers and senior civil service officials in Germany in 1944. Now, there were several attempts to eliminate Hitler from the scene, but the final one didn't go so well either. When von Stauffenberg, who was a war hero, and who was also working with another war hero, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, the hero of the North Africa campaign, they and others decided enough was enough with Hitler. And I think it's going to come to a point in this country, especially if Mueller, the special counsel, is dismissed, that we have to hit the streets and remove Mr. Trump by all means, any means possible.
You're sounding a little revolutionary, Wayne.
But if you do that, I mean, who do you put in place? Because from what I look at, from what I see, he's the least dangerous.
Well, we let the American people decide who to put in.
But that's who they want. He won.
Well, the Electoral College made no
Well,
sense.
I think
he did. I mean,
there's some debate as to whether he actually won or not. But with a little help from foreign intelligence organizations and foreign organized crime elements, we saw a lot of social networking abuse. We don't know how many people were turned away at the polls. We know there was voter suppression, and still is voter suppression. But don't
both parties do that though? Participate in that?
I'm sorry, what?
Don't both parties participate in voter suppression?
No, maybe in the past, but no longer. I mean, there were, 50 years ago, stories about Chicago and the Daley Machine. But these days, the party that attempts to restrict voters, we know that from the Kansas Attorney General and the prospective Kansas Governor, Chris Kobach, who Trump put in charge of a commission to look into voter fraud. Trump was saying millions of people voted illegally. Why? Trump said he wanted this commission to find cases of voter fraud.
Okay, but I don't mean to cut.
One case.
I don't mean to cut you off, but don't you agree that do you agree that both parties commit voter suppression?
No, not anymore. It's only one party that does it. It's the Republican Party.
So
what I call the Nazi, the Nazi Party in the country.
Right, I get that. What would you call what happened in the 2016 primary on the Democratic side? Wasn't that like an act of fraud, voter suppression? When you think
what happened in the Democratic primary was there was always the issue with superdelegates at the convention.
Mm-hmm.
And the superdelegates mostly committed to Hillary Clinton.
I don't mean to cut you off. In New York State, the Democratic Party in New York State, the Democratic-controlled government of New York State, when they had their primary election, they opened up voter places where you can go and vote like 6 hours later than they normally would. And if you go back and look at in Massachusetts, Bernie Sanders won on unanimously by a wide margin of votes when they were used paper ballots. But when it came down to the machines, Hillary Clinton was winning overwhelming. And people were getting kicked off the voter rolls all through California. I can name off numerous states pretty much all through Connecticut.
Well, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find many instances of Democratic voters being turned away. They were wiped off
the voter post. A lady named Debbie, the same progressive, she got a whole video catalog with numerous of evidence. There's a lot of people, a lot of YouTubers out here with a lot of evidence showing how people were kicked off voter rolls from state after state. Ain't that like when you consider that the same as voter suppression?
I've been investigating voter fraud going back to 2000, and I can say in 2000 it was the Republicans, especially in Florida, that committed what's called caging. They caged voters off the rolls illegally, and that was done by Jeb Bush and his Secretary of State, Catherine Harris. It happened again in 2004. It was Ohio was the key state, and it was done by the Secretary of State there, Kenneth Blackwell, the Republican, who also happened to be co-chair of the George W. Bush re-election campaign. This is what has happened time and time again. The massive vote fraud, or not vote fraud, but election fraud that takes place is with the Republican states in general elections, and also in some cases in states that allow crossover primary voting, where they make it very tough for independents and Democrats to cross over and vote in a Republican primary.
Yeah, but the Democrats did that in 2016 in California.
And there was no voter fraud in California.
No, but what I'm saying is they have ballots for independents if you're an independent or non-party official in California. So if you want to vote during the election for a Republican or for a Democratic, you got to get a different ballot. But they were giving these people provisional ballots, and they wasn't. Those ballots wasn't being counted and stuff. Don't you think that's a form of voter suppression? Because all this stuff went on in 2016. So what I'm saying is I think it's a combination of both parties.
I don't think so anymore. I think that the party that commits 99.9% of voter suppression and election fraud is the Republican Party.
But wouldn't it be fair to say that the Republicans do this to try to keep the illegals from voting?
No.
They do it to keep anybody who's considered a minority from voting.
Oh.
African Americans, Hispanics. It's not, illegals are not allowed to vote anyway. I mean,
no.
you got to be a U.S. citizen to vote in an election. But what we see the Republicans doing is that they're trying to put up all these barriers to registration and voting. They want, in some states now, they want passports, notarized birth certificates, all baptismal certificates, all the stuff that a lot of people have trouble getting a hold of. A lot of the people who are turned away from voting, too, are the elderly, who may have voted 20 years prior, but then they're forced, and they may not even have a driver's license anymore because they're living in nursing homes, and they're being thrown off voter rolls because they're considered, you've got to show us that you're a U.S. citizen, when in fact some of them were born in this country in the 1920s. This is who the Republicans are trying to suppress the votes for.
When they gutted the Voting Rights Act under the Obama administration, why didn't he go use an executive order to continue to enforce that? Why do you think they didn't do that? The Democrats.
Do what? I mean, Obama's Justice Department took states to court to basically put them on notice that attempts to suppress voter registration would not be tolerated under the Voting Rights Act of in this country. So there's no evidence that Obama.
No, I'm saying why didn't he do? Why didn't he do? The Democrats didn't do nothing when they gutted the Voting Rights Act. They put up a facade, but they really didn't do anything because we still right here today as we speaking right now on this phone with that same stuff in place.
Well, look, if everything you look at what Trump's doing right now is to commit massive voter suppression in the midterms and again in 2020, because he does not have democratic values, small d democratic values at heart. He thinks of himself as a dictator, and it's time for this guy to go. And it's time for all the Republican scoundrels and crooks and con artists and flim-flam men that he's brought into government to go along with him, whether they go directly to jail or he can move to North Korea for all I care. I don't really care what happens to him, but this crowd has got to be eliminated from the federal government and also their colleagues in state governments. At least Missouri finally got rid of that awful sex pervert and crook Eric Greitens. And I hope Scott Walker in Wisconsin goes with him. And there's a few other. This guy Chris Kopak is running for governor in Kansas. Hopefully he'll be defeated. And I'm hoping for a blue tsunami this November that's going to look like that scene from Deep Impact, where the tsunami knocks over the Statue of Liberty.
But do you honestly think that's going to happen?
Right now, I do. I think,
because I know right here in Missouri, and I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. I just want to finish out the question so you can answer. Like right here in Missouri, Claire McCaskill seats up for election, and I'm pretty sure that she's going to lose that general election in November. She's going to lose that seat to a Republican because
Claire McCaskill?
Yeah.
Well, Eric Greitens is talking about running as an independent for the Senate. I hope he does, because
he might mess around. He might mess around and win. Because what people don't talk about, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm gonna finish with the question so you answer. What people don't talk about is people like me that used to vote inside the Democratic Party, but after they experienced of what happened in 2016 and see all the status quo and everything still being the same, Pelosi, all these criminals. Like, I know Claire McCaskill is basically, she's a Republican. I know this. She hasn't done nothing for the state of Missouri. So it's people like me that used to be part of the Democratic Party. I'm not voting for Claire McCaskill because I already know she's bought and on. And it's a lot, and the people in the Democratic Party do not talk about there is a real divide. And it's going to cost them to lose seats when they allow people like Claire McCaskill to run within that party. They're going to continue to lose. This is just my observation.
Yeah, well, I think what's going to look, the Greitens thing left a very sour taste in people's mouths. I mean, not only was it shown that he was using a charity for political purposes, but having a woman tied up in a basement, some sadomasochistic sexual episode. I mean, this is sort of like Trump, being accused of raping a 12 and 13-year-old girl. I think people need to wake up and realize that, the Democrats are the people that go out and earn a living, pay the taxes, and the Republicans in their country clubs and gated communities are the ones participating in orgies, surfing the net, trying to get dates with 12-year-old girls. Fortunately, in some cases, they're detectives and they're arrested, but in some cases, these sex perverts are elected president of the United States. I know in Indiana now there's a lot of people looking at this guy, Mike Pence, who seems to have an issue. He seems to break out in hives every time he sees a gay person. The word there is that he and his wife Karen met each other in a gay conversion camp run by their mumbo jumbo tambourine banging church some years ago, and she was, basically the gay conversion people told them they should get married. They used to both be Irish Catholic, and that's their background. Now they're in this tambourine banging mumbo jumbo religion.
Wait, you're suggesting that Pence and his wife, like Pence was a fag, his wife was a lesbian, and they had to go to a conversion to try to get them straight. And at the conversion, that's when they hook up?
Yeah, that's what
they fucking awesome.
Oh my God.
They tell gay people you got to turn straight, you got to get married and have children.
Oh my God. So the reason why Pence loses his mind around homosexuals is because he wants to be banging them.
Yeah.
He has been
he's having withdrawals.
This is what Michelle Bachmann's husband was doing up in Minnesota. He had a gay conversion.
Oh my God.
Camp up there. And, of course, everybody knows that Michelle Bachmann's husband is as gay as Liberace.
But if you notice, the ones that always talk about, the relegants, the fags and the trannies and all this stuff, I feel like they only doing that because they can't really act out on their sexual desires like they want to.
They're gaslighting and they're projecting. And that seems to be the theme of at least this Trump administration. I mean, some of these people, the reason, I think her name was Michelle Wolf, the comedian who was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. She had a joke, and sometimes the jokes, I've been at one of those things, and when they tell a joke and there's like nervous laughter, she told a joke. She said she called Mike Pence Anderson Cooper without the gay, and everybody there got it. Without the gay, like he used to be gay, but they took the gay away from him.
Right.
So, this was her joke. This was one of her jokes at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Oh, my God.
People, they may know more about it in Indiana, but they seem to also know about it in D.C.
Oh, they all be doing that little nasty stuff.
But, back to Trump and his dictator thing. What would be a sign, Wayne, that everyone can see, maybe an action that he does or some sort of law he tries to evoke, that would be a clear sign of his dictatorial, basically ambitions?
Well, I think the canary in the coal mine will be if he decides to start doing what Nixon did, a Saturday Night Massacre in the Justice Department, getting rid of the Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, getting a new person there to fire Mueller. Now there's something called a dead man's switch with this investigation. Mueller has already stuck a lot of his investigatory material and what they call pocket indictments in various U.S. attorneys' offices in jurisdictions where Trump and his people have some criminal liability. And if he fires Mueller, these things will just trigger automatically. These indictments will be taken to judges, and we could see indictments of people like Roger Stone in the Southern District of Florida because he lives in Coconut Grove outside of Miami.
Well, he is.
We could see indictments out of the Southern District of New York for various obstruction of justice.
Why would they indict Roger Stone, the old reporter?
What's that?
Why would they indict Roger Stone? He's just an old reporter. Hangs out with Alex Jones and all that.
Why should we trust Robert Mueller?
Well,
no man.
Well, I trust Robert Mueller because I've been following this entire this huge network of mafiosi that is called the Trump Organization and his affiliates, and he's doing exactly treating Trump as he did the mob figures when he went after years ago when he was at the Southern District of New York. So, I mean, these are criminals, and criminals need to go to jail.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm all for it.
But
I'm all for it.
But what
I'm
he
all for his investigation. And in the interest of disclosure, I've actually presented some of my reference material. I put together a massive electronic chart of 5,000 Trump and affiliated entities involving everything from money laundering. I passed that on to the special prosecutor's office. I know they received it. I don't know if they're using it, but they informed me that they did receive it. So I'm like some people that are in the news media. I'm supporting Robert Mueller and his team. It's not the first time. I was a temporary special agent for the FBI back in 1982, so this isn't my first rodeo with the FBI.
Well, in your political experience, how rampant is political corruption? I'm talking about where you're just getting bags of money. Like, can you just give a percent? You don't have to give any examples, like 20%, 30%.
Well, I haven't seen anything to this level in any political campaign or administration. We're talking about people who are involved in not only money laundering, but smuggling, counterfeiting U.S. currency, drug smuggling, human trafficking, theft, tax evasion. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, Michael Cohen, for example, who now looks like they put together a lot of the documents that he shredded, and they've also decrypted some of his encrypted emails. He now all of a sudden wants to do a deal with the prosecutor. That's because his goose is cooked. Mm-hmm. Michael Cohen was involved in all kinds of stuff. He was involved in phony prescriptions. Trump says he wants to do something with the opioid crisis. Michael Cohen incorporated firms in New Jersey that were handing out all kinds of opioids on phony prescriptions. Michael Cohen was involved in gambling casino ships down in southern Florida that involved a lot of organized crime and drug money laundering. So this is what now a lot of this money. Where did it go? It was laundered through purchases of Trump condominiums in Miami, Hollywood, Florida, Las Vegas, and New York.
Wow.
And all this is under the Robert Mueller's investigation?
It's either Robert Mueller or the Southern District of New York. Now, there may be others. We know that the Manafort case is also handled by the Eastern District of Virginia in Alexandria. There may be other U.S. attorneys' offices that have not been publicized that are looking also at this. I say Trump. It's Trump, Kushner, Manafort. There's a lot of other players in this. It's like if you talked about organized crime in New York in the 70s, you had to talk about the Gambinos, the Gottis, Lucchese's, the Columbos. You had to talk about all the families. So it's not just Trump. It's Trump and all these other organized families.
So is all this coming from or entities off of other little stuff that's been going on what was the whole beginning of the reason why Mueller was investigating Trump? What that had something to do with the Russians and all that stuff?
Well, I think Russia is sort of
what I'm saying is the first reason why there was even any investigation in the first place, it was because of supposedly the Trump Russia stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and
but Russia, you got to realize when you say Russia, you're also talking about Russian oligarchs that haven't been in Russia for 20 years. They live in Britain. They live in Israel. They live in Switzerland. They live in
right.
the United States.
I get all of that stuff. But what was the main purpose for the investigation in the first place was the Trump and the Russian collusion to rig the election, right?
Even more basic than that, it's illegal for foreign entities to participate in U.S. elections, whether it's for the school board or the presidency of the United States.
Yeah, but all they found was people doing like little Facebook ads. Like it just seemed like because
it was more than that. It was more than Facebook ads.
I don't mean to cut you off. I'm just skeptic of Robert Mueller because wasn't he the FBI, like the head of the FBI during like 9/11?
He'd only been in that job for like something like 11 days when 9/11 took place.
Okay, so
Louis Freeh had been the FBI director.
Okay, so they probably talked.
Hold on.
I'm getting somewhere with this. So wasn't Robert Mueller the one that said that they were sure that that Iraq had and Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction?
No,
because I got to find that video because I remember him saying something like according to that. So I don't want to like say it's actually, but he said something around like 9/11 with like when they were saying that they had these. It was after 9/11 when they were saying that Saddam and Iraq had all these weapons of mass destruction, and we know that they didn't have WMDs.
No, as a matter of fact, Robert Mueller, just like a few weeks after 9/11, said, we right now have no evidence that Osama bin Laden was involved in 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, anybody, I think a lot of people believe that with the story that was narrated, it never happened. I believe that the story they gave didn't happen.
That shows you that Robert Mueller wasn't going to say, like many in the Bush administration said immediately, like people like John Bolton and others, it's bin Laden did it. Bin Laden did it. Dick Cheney said it was bin Laden. See, Robert Mueller wants. No,
I didn't say bin Laden. I said that it was weapons of mass destruction, WMDs that Saddam. Didn't Robert Mueller say that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, WMDs?
No, the people that said that were people Dick Cheney.
No, I'm not talking about who knocked down the World Trade buildings about that. I'm talking about when we got ready to go invade in Iraq. That was the narrative.
Well, that's not. I mean, Robert Mueller is the FBI director. He doesn't get involved in foreign defense or intelligence issues.
Right, I get.
The job of the FBI is law enforcement.
So domestic.
He wouldn't have even been involved in.
But they were saying this was an act of terror.
Huh?
Never mind. Okay, that's fine.
No, one thing I found interesting, Wayne, you said that Robert Mueller was only in office for 11 days prior to 9/11. I just find that perplexing. Like the, 9/11, 11 days, all the like the numerology behind it all. I just find that a little interesting.
Well, anyone who wants to blame the FBI for not being, and look, I know FBI agents who actually knew there was going to be an attack on the Trade Center, and they weren't listened to. But Mueller he was still unpacking his boxes when it happened. The guy that should be blamed, of course, is Louis Freeh, who was not a very exemplary FBI director.
Well, can I ask you a very serious question pertaining to 9/11? Did the Israel?
If I could just mention something about Louis Freeh. Louis Freeh was a colleague of Rudy Giuliani in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York back in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
A colleague and friend.
Huh. Well, did the Israel Secret Services have anything, to your knowledge, to do with 9/11?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've written a book about it. And I wrote one of the first long articles about it. There were There were Israelis who were Mossad agents who were seen photographing the trade center before the first plane impacted. There were Mossad agents casing law enforcement and intelligence and military bases across the country prior to and just after the attack. There absolutely was involvement.
So my question is, since we give Israel damn near $4 billion in equipment and money every year, I mean, don't you think it's kind of messed up that they, kind of participated in that, and we're still? I mean, because last time I checked, we did not put so-called Jews in furnaces during World War II. That was the Germans and the Nazis. So why the hell should we have to foot the bill for their situation when our own people over here?
Now we always have because of it's domestic politics. But now with Trump, he's given Israel more than they ever could have hoped for. Moving the embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing Jerusalem, which is a contested city, as a capital of Israel. Now getting ready to recognize Israel's annexation of the West Bank and the Golan Heights. No other president, even George W. Bush, offered them that, and he was considered to be the closest to them at the time. Israel, by backing Mr. Trump and this Kushner element, when the anti-Trump president takes over, I think Israel is going to have a big price to pay for their involvement in our political process and their lavish endorsement and praise for Donald Trump.
Wow. I mean, I know we're running short on time, but this is one question I really want you to answer. It pertains to continuity of government, and also how could Trump possibly use those laws of continuity of government to basically stay in office way past, his term, like, a nuclear blast happened in an American city.
Yeah. Well, obviously there's continuity of operations and continuity of government. I worked on that back in the 80s, and the threat being that, we had about a 15 to 18 minute window before the first Soviet nuclear tipped cruise missile would arrive in the greater metropolitan Washington, D.C. area. So, if there's any kind, it doesn't have to be a nuke. It could be an outbreak of smallpox or some other pathogen. He could invoke emergency measures through FEMA and other federal agencies. And getting back to 9/11, if people forget that on September 11, 2001, that was primary election day in New York City. And, of course, the election was pretty well postponed because of what happened. Mayor Giuliani suggested that because of 9/11, maybe he should remain in office, even though he was term limited. His term was over that year. He suggested that maybe I'll remain in office until we can have an election. So we already know that this guy is now Trump's lawyer and, his TV spokesperson already tried that number in New York. Totally illegal, totally against the city charter of New York. But he tried to run that. Of course, they laughed at him.
So, have you heard anything about the Republicans and conservatives trying to evoke another constitutional convention?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be successful in that. They're trying all kinds of things to stay in power. There's been an attempt to split California. It's not going to be on the ballot as a referendum issue, split California into 3 states. They think that they're going to peel off a few Republican, Senate seats and congressional seats and some electoral votes. But the polls show that if they do split into Northern California, Southern California, and California, that those 3 new Californias will be solidly Democratic. So you know,
it won't
Democrats
work.
will pick up 4 more Senate seats, and they'll still maintain the same number of electoral votes. So it's a fool's errand. But, you know, this idea of a constitutional convention. And people that are pushing that are like the Koch brothers, who would love nothing more than to get in there and take out various parts of the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, and others, to make this a country where only billionaires would feel comfortable.
Well, like in the beginning of the country, you know, rich old white men had all the rights.
Yeah,
you know?
But unfortunately, we've progressed a lot from those days. But when we talk about voter suppression and things like that, getting rid of child labor laws so you can put a kid to work, you know, at 11 and 12-year-olds when they're 10 or 11, and there's no safety standards.
Right.
That's what the Koch brothers want. That's what these libertarians are after.
Now the Koch
they don't
brothers,
want any laws.
they're part of the John Birch Society, right?
Yeah. Well, those people back in the 50s were you know, considered, well, they're fringe. You know, they went around in those days and said, oh, you know, it's a communist plot that they're putting fluoride in the water supply, and people kind of laughed at them. Unfortunately, there was a bunch of them in Dallas, and they were part of the welcoming committee for President Kennedy, and before him, Ambassador Adlai Stevenson, who was jostled, and they threw stuff at him and hit him with picket signs, and he came back, watched, and told Kennedy, look, if I were you, I wouldn't go down there. You know, he was met by the John Birchers, and well, the rest of that is history. But yeah, the John Birchers seem to be coming back, and
yes.
You know, they were fringe back in the 50s. They kind of started disappearing in the 60s, and now they seem to have made a resurgence.
Well, you can thank guys like Alex Jones, you know, spreading the fluoride in the water, you know, the government's trying to kill you aspect to it, and that gets a lot of people scared.
The best one was the juice boxes would turn kids gay.
I got one more question.
I had a problem with that.
I got one more question. I know you pressed for time. What's the deal with that kid? Is it Idaho that's supposed to have died or something from that bubonic plague or something? This was in like Idaho.
I don't know about it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's pretty recent. I think that just came out a couple of days ago.
But I'll tell you, talk about bubonic plague, you talk about all these other pathogens, you know, the Spanish flu of 1918 and all these other things. You know, the Centers for Disease Control's budgets are being cut along with a lot of others. And that is an agency we absolutely need. And to cut their budget and to, you know, say, well, if there's an outbreak, you know, of some pathogen like Ebola in this country or something like that, you know, just go to your local CVS or Walgreens clinic and get treated for it. It's just, you know, insane.
It's not going to happen. If something like that happens here, it's just going to expose how weak our infrastructure is, because it's going to kill a lot of people.
Yeah, and I mean, I should also say, because we've had a recent outbreak of salmonella, and food poisoning with some lettuce, is that the Department of Agriculture, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service is someone else who's getting their budget cut. And again, these inspectors are absolutely needed, especially now that we're going into this trade war. We're going to see a lot more food products, a bigger demand, bigger production cycle for food products in this country, and people are going to cut corners. These manufacturers, these food distributors are going to cut corners, and therefore now we need those inspectors. Look, I never had a big problem with eating food from Canada, because they have a very good system there. There is a lot of produce that comes in from south of the border, and you got to be really careful with cholera because of the sanitation conditions in some of those countries. But now with U.S. farmers and these cattle ranches and meat slaughterhouses, now going to have to be producing more and more to keep our shelves filled in the supermarket. I'm afraid they're going to cut corners, and cutting the agriculture department.
So
budget is just again ludicrous.
Yeah, salmonella is normally a disease found from like meat. So and now all of a sudden it's in wheat, it's in lettuce that was coming out of Arizona. They just did a recall on the Sugar Smacks because it's got salmonella now. I know that it shouldn't be no meat put into that to make that product. Couldn't it be from like, because I know in Iowa they have these hog confinements, and they take that waste and they sell it to other farmers that grow different crops to substitute fertilizer. Could that be part of the problem too? Because this stuff is going on all over the country.
But we gotta, that's why we need those inspectors out there. We need more of them, not less of them. We need those inspectors out there to look at these processes. E. coli is another big problem. So,
but what would stop the corporation from just paying off the inspector? Hell, if I know I'm dirty, right? The inspector that's assigned to me, he comes to my office. Mr. True Power, we want to check. And I'm like, nope, hold on, guy. Here's a few $1,000. Send your kids to college and let me do my thing. How do we protect ourselves from that type of activity?
I think that's the reason it's best to have two inspectors. That the military uses the 2-person rule in a lot of critical areas, and food inspection should be 2-person rule as well.
And just pray that we don't have 2 dirty cops like they did in the 75th precinct up there in New York back in the 80s, where you had all those corrupt cops in that one precinct.
Yeah, but because of Serpico, they got and others they got found out. So I mean, by and large, my experience with the people that work in the civil service, I mean, there's a few bad eggs, obviously. There tends to be more of them as the higher up you go in rank. So you get to a scot through it, and you got an absolute crook on your hands. But people that work for the Forestry Service, I mean, the superintendent of Yellowstone National Park just was fired because he wanted to protect the bison. The cattle ranchers wanted to go in there and cull the bison herd. The bison used to be an endangered species. Now they're coming back. Of course, he got fired because he was trying to protect, the wildlife in the park. That's the Trump administration, pretty much in a nutshell.
Well, the thing is, we can sit here and talk about it, but I'm in agreement with you, Wayne. At some point, we have to stop the talk and get into action mode. At some point, are we going to wait until it's too late? Or are we going to try to avert? Because I actually heard some Christian evangel person saying that Trump is a fulfillment of the prophecy. Some guy prophesied Trump was going to be the president. And now that's so dangerous when you try to take this guy, like you said, he raped a kid, and you're going to say that God wants him to be here to do this and that. That's very dangerous. That's very dangerous.
Well, I don't know what God they worship, but my God says this guy's got to go because he's definitely not a Christian. Christians don't separate kids from their parents.
Or have casinos.
I mean, that's not Christians don't say that everybody ought to have an AR-15. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's, Adolf Hitler, he claimed he was a Christian too, but then after he took power, he went after all the churches, and he said, no, everyone's going to worship me. I'm the God, and he brought back all this Teutonic religion stuff, so.
With the help of the Thule Society.
Do you think Westboro Baptist Church, do you think those are Christians?
No, they're nuts. I mean, they're crazy. I mean, they want to go picket.
Wait, isn't that the God hate fags people?
The ACLU supports them in that, but I don't consider that to be a very religious thing to do, to go picket funerals and yell obscenities at people that are,
right.
To,
I don't agree with them protesting. I don't think the most sickest
person. No,
person.
right to protest, but I don't think they're a legit. I don't know what religious affiliation. I think I read it's Baptist or something, but I don't even think the Southern Baptist Convention would claim them.
And as desperate as
they got some
members.
problems themselves. They just had the guy in charge of it was messing around with some of the church ladies, and so
Thank you, God, he was messing around with ladies
when he resigned from the Southern Baptist.
But they do that stuff in all the churches. But going back to Westboro for a second, is what I'm saying is, like, when I've seen like videos and stuff of them protesting. I've seen them do some protesting and stuff. But the stuff they were saying, a lot of that stuff's in the King James Bible.
Oh yeah, I mean the King James Bible legitimizes slavery.
Mm-hmm.
So
obey your master. Basically.
We had Sarah Sanders the other day quoting some passage from Romans, and Sessions did it before her, justifying taking kids from their parents, and said, well, the Bible says you're supposed to. It's very godly to obey the law. Well, if I recall, Martin Luther King went to prison because he didn't obey the law. But the laws at the time were deemed to be unconstitutional and not very American.
And that's another good point. Constitution in America. If we get to the origins of the Constitution, the majority of Americans that we're looking at, it does not apply to you guys. It really doesn't. I always say this: a system cannot fail you if it was not designed for you. Now, I understand we have evolved and made a lot of strides, but that's going against the system, not going with the intent, purpose of the system. Because the intent, purpose.
That's why there was an amendment process. So we've got, I think it's 25 amendments now to the Constitution.
Right.
So, I mean, the founders obviously said, look, if this thing is going to continue as a legitimate document, there's got to be a means to amend it. And, some amendments never made it, like the Equal Rights Amendment, which I wish it would, that would go a long way for gender equality, but,
right.
There's other amendments too that I think should be enshrined in the Constitution, but we're not going to see any of them until we get a Congress that's responsive to the needs of the people and not the needs of the Koch brothers,
the needs of the corporations,
Sheldon Adelson's casinos, and ExxonMobil.
But that point there that you just made, Wayne, that in itself is the problem, because something can be amended. Guess what? It can be unamended as well, even though we haven't seen an example of that. But the potential is there.
Yeah. Well,
that's
why
the
I think
danger.
we need to get members of Congress and somebody in the White House that actually decides that to suggest that the American people should obey him like North Koreans obey Kim Jong-un. I mean, that is just beyond the pale.
Right.
I don't think there's any other president. As we've had some bad presidents, but I don't think any president ever suggested anything that outrageous. I believe his comment is reason enough to impeach him right now.
Wow.
At 7:15 Eastern Standard Time, I would call a special session of the House of Representatives right now and the Judiciary Committee to just impeach him on that alone.
But see, now that brings up a deal. Mark from Anaheim told us that Trump basically has installed 68 or something like that lower judges, appellate judges, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if he's going through cleaning out the judicial system like that, you know, sort of like on Star Wars when the Jedi's went there for Palpatine, you know, he has to stand trial. And the Palpatine's like, you know, the one guy's like, he can't stand trial because he owns all the senators. He owns all the judges. Right. Can't we get into a situation like that with Trump?
Well, that's why he has to be limited. He has to be limited to at least one term because a two-term president gets to appoint quite a few judges. But now, if the Senate that confirms the judges, a very major reason why the Senate needs to go Democratic is the Democrats have to block his judicial appointments because he's trying to put some real
nut jobs
idiots and these lifetime appointments to the federal bench.
Yes, it's a lifetime, and that's the thing, is that, you know, long after Trump's gone, the damage is still there, festering. It's sort of like, you know, a wound.
Yeah. And it's very
But
hard
who's going to stop
the judge?
But who's going to stop him from winning? Because I don't see I mean, who is out there that can literally beat Trump? Because it was somebody in 2016 that ran that would have beaten Trump that actually talked about the kitchen table issues, and he was cheated.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, Barack Obama has had meetings now with, I thought I read maybe 18 prospective presidential candidates in 2020, Democrats. And
yeah, but I don't mean to cut you off, but under the Obama administration, it was the largest wealth transfer took place under his administration.
You mean from the wealth going from the people to the rich?
Yes, under his administration. So why would we trust anybody that's affiliated with Obama?
I think we have to look at the fact that most of his term in office, we had a Republican Congress that was writing those laws. But I think what Obama's telling these prospective candidates is, look, don't have a circular firing squad like we saw with the Republicans last time. Settle on a few candidates. And I mean, he met with everyone from Joe Biden all the way down to the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, who's all of them are saying they're running for president. So I think the message was, from what I understand, keep it to the bread and butter issues. Look, you know, once you get in there, you know, you do your thing, carry out the policies that the voters want, but you're only going to get there by talking about bread and butter issues.
Yeah, but how can they be trusted when you got people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer? These are well-known corporate whores.
Yeah, but you also have prospective candidates like Sherrod Brown, the senator from Ohio.
But he's bought on too.
Huh?
He's bought on too.
No, he isn't. He's
Cory Booker, Kamala Harris.
He's out of labor union.
All of those guys are owned by corporations. So, like,
well, are you saying that? Are you saying the AFL-CIO is a corporation?
What I'm saying is that somebody that's actually going to work on behalf of the people is not in none of these politicians that you've been talking about coming from the Democratic Party. Because if you look at their vote records, they vote right down the line with the Republicans when it comes to corporate welfare. Right down the line. They have done it. They have done it since Bill Clinton won.
Senator Brown has voted against a lot of these bailouts and tax. He voted against this tax giveaway to the billionaires. I mean, no, not. I mean, there are some Democrats. You're absolutely right. They're too cozy. Schumer with Wall Street.
We got one right here in Missouri. Claire McCall she's bought on.
Yeah, but she, you know, to prevent Trump from packing the courts with his fascists, I'd rather have McCaskill as a vote to block those nominations than Holly. Holly would be a Trump psychopath.
But Claire McCaskill is a Republican, though. She's gonna put a conservative in there.
She's got a D after her name. She would be counted amongst the Democratic. If they get a majority, she'd be counted amongst the Democratic majority.
Well, I know she's running that. She's got a D behind her name, but the policies she vote for are Republican policies. She's been touring all around Missouri, trying to convince Republicans to vote for her.
Do you think Hawley would vote against any of Trump's judicial nominees?
I don't see no difference between Claire McCaskill and Josh Hawley.
Oh, there's a huge one, because McCaskill would not support, in a majority in the Senate, she would not support Trump's judicial nominees.
But what's the point of? It's no point to vote for judicial nominees when the Republicans already got the majority in the first place.
Well, if the Democrats take the majority in the Senate, all of Trump's less than acceptable judicial nominees are dead on arrival. They don't get confirmed. They don't go on the bench.
Right, but my whole thing of why was asking these questions, because it all ties back to the divide in the Democratic Party that nobody wants to talk about. Like I said, I stated before, I've normally voted democratically, but I see these people's records. It's very difficult for me to vote for a Republican with the D by his name. If I wanna vote for a Republican, I might as well just go and vote for the real thing.
You want to see some bad records? Look at Congressman Steve King from Iowa.